We will work with 3 triangles here again, so let's split this page up into 3 sections. And so here are the 3 different triangles. And the one important thing that I should keep mentioning is that these triangles have to be right triangles for you to be able to use the 3 different ratios, or one of those 3 different ratios. And so before you start with a triangle, your first goal should always be to figure out if your triangle is a right triangle. Another thing that I will quickly point out as well is that since you know what this angle is and you know what this angle is, you can actually figure out what the third angle is equal to. Since you know that the sum of these angles has to be 180 degrees, I can take 180 degrees and subtract 90 degrees and subtract 19 degrees, and that should give me the leftover angle for this size, for that corner there. And so that should give me an angle of 71 degrees for this corner. I will not write that in, so we don't have to worry about that, but that's how you would find the missing angle if you have 2 different angles given to you already. In this case, I am looking for the letter D. I have the angle 19 degrees given to me, and I have 6 for my length here on the bottom. And to figure out which ratio I should be using, I will write down the acronym SOHCAHTOA. The first thing that you always need to identify is to see if you have the hypotenuse. Right angle, hypotenuse, that's D. Okay, so that means I am looking for it, so I'll put a check mark through the hypotenuses. And now you will go to your angle. You see, okay, I have an angle, which means I can find out the ratios. And from the perspective of my angle, I have this side given to me, which is the one that touches the angle, and that is the adjacent. And so from these 3 ratios, you can see that you have 2 of the cosine ratio, and you're looking for the third one in those. And so that's the one that we want to use to figure out what our D value is. Set up your equation first. Cos of the angle is equal to A divided by H, adjacent divided by the hypotenuse. And now we can put in our numbers. Cosine of the angle, which is 19 degrees, is equal to the adjacent side, which is 6, divided by the hypotenuse, which is our D value. And so now you can see that we have a missing length in the denominator. So to find out what our D value is, what we will need to do is multiply both sides by the D value. Remember, when you solve for an equation, you always have to get rid of the denominator by multiplying by the denominator. And in our case, that denominator is just a missing value. But for the process, that shouldn't change a thing. We will multiply both sides by the missing value, and that will cancel this missing value out on the right-hand side, which leaves me with 6 on the right-hand side, and with D times cos of 19 on the left-hand side. Now, I can't calculate that because I do not have the D value, so I can't actually figure out what this is. But to find out what the D value is, I will need to isolate it now. See, now I don't have anything in the denominator. Now I will need to divide both sides by cos of 19, so that I will be left with the D value on the left-hand side by itself. So this will cancel cos of 19 out on the left-hand side and leave me with D by itself. And on the right-hand side, I will have 6 divided by cos 19. And since all those numbers are given to me, I can actually figure out what this answer is. So 6 divided by the cosine of 19, and that is equal to 6.3457. So let me explain to you again what is happening here. We know that the angle is 19 degrees, and I have a hypotenuse and the adjacent to the angle. That means I need to use the cos ratio of that angle. Now the cos ratio of that angle is 0.9455. This number is 0.9455. Now what you need to realize is that 6 divided by something has to be equal to 0.9455. If I take 6 and divide it by 6, I should get 1. And since I need to have a number that is less than 1, I need to divide the 6 by a number that is greater than 6. And so you can see here that that number is 6.3457, which is in fact greater than 6. So take 6 divided by 6.3457 and you get actually that ratio of 0.9455. So that's the concept behind using this ratio. But for now, it's good to just follow the process until you're comfortable with that process. So the final answer here is D is equal to 6.35 units. Let's go to the next example. And again, to figure out the ratio that we want to use, we will use the acronym SOHCAHTOA. And just to make sure that we can actually use it, we will look for the hypotenuse. Do we have a hypotenuse? Which means, do we have a right angle? And in this case, we do. Right angle is here, and the hypotenuse has to be across the right angle, and that is called E. So I do not have it, but I am looking for it. I need to find it. So I'll put a check mark through those hypotenuses. And then the next thing is to look for the angle. You have an angle here, and so that means I can find the ratio for that angle. Either one of those three ratios I can find. And then from the perspective of that angle, what is this length, this 17 unit long length? And that is across that angle, which means that I have the opposite side given to me. And so now you can see from these three ratios that the sine ratio is the one where I have two things given to me, and I'm looking for the third one. So that is the ratio that I will use to figure out what my E value is. So we have again a missing length in the denominator, which means I need to get rid of that denominator first. And to do that, we multiply both sides by E, which cancels this side out and leaves us with 17 on the right-hand side and E times sine of 50 on the left-hand side. So to isolate E on the left-hand side, we need to divide by the sine of 50 so that this cancels out. What we do on the left side, we also need to do on the right side. And so now I will be left with E on the left-hand side. And on the right-hand side, I can actually calculate 17 divided by sine of 50. And that answer is 22.1919. Just to quickly think through this, I know the ratio has to be the sine of 50, which is 0.77 approximately. So I know that the sine of 50 is approximately 0.77, approximately 3/4. And I know that I have to divide 17 by something to give me 3/4. And that means that the E value has to be bigger than 17, so that I get something like 0.77. and that number is 22.19. So let's do the third example. Again, we will start with the acronym. First thing you want to identify is the hypotenuse. If you don't have a right angle, you can't use this, and that's why you need to make sure that you identify the hypotenuse first. Next, you look at the angle. The angle is given to you, which means we can check the ratios, sine, cosine, and tangent. And then from the perspective of this angle, we have this side right here, which is the 5, and that is the adjacent side. And so from these check marks, you can see that we need to be using the cosine ratio. And now we just need to solve for m. And before I do that, I just want you guys to see the following. Here's the beginning. Cos 19 is 6 divided by d, and so therefore d has to be equal to 6 divided by cos 19. So that's what we get on this one. If you look at this one here, you saw that sine of 50 degrees is 17 divided by e, and so therefore e has to be 17 divided by the sine of 50. And some of you guys may see this very quickly, that these two basically replace each other, switch places. The e value goes on the left side and the sine of 50 goes on into the denominator. So if you see that, you can definitely feel free to use it, but I will continue teaching this to you using inverse operations. So now you are able to find the missing length if it's either in the denominator or in the numerator. You can find the missing length, and the next example set will go through finding the missing angle.